Not bad, not bad. I think Mike is being a baby on this episode.
Oh.
It's the LSAT, not LSATs.
Don't go in the closet.
I immediately was like, you gotta be f***ing kidding me.
I know.
Look, we both decided we wanted to be casual, comfortable. Who is their client? But at the end of the day, Harvey has these lines he won't cross. Welcome to Suits on Suits. In this show, we talk about the culture of law, legal concepts, and plot points that come up on the show Suits.
We're your hosts, Jared and Quinn Mayberry, brothers and practicing attorneys.
So beyond being lawyers, what qualifies us to talk about this show?
I work at a big law firm, and you went to Harvey's alma mater, Harvard.
Had to ask Jared to say that about 5 times.
You mean that little tiny regional school up in the Northeast?
Yeah, I want people to know. Emancipation power plays in the most unexpected legal showdown in Suits history so far. Vulnerability takes center stage and nothing goes as expected. Would Marco not being emancipated be as impactful as MJ taking off a couple of years in his prime? Or was Harvey just trying to bring up Michael Jordan again? What do Lewis, Bruno the Cat, and Harvey have in common? Turns out they're dentists. And by the end of this episode, one of your favorite characters is getting fired. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, watch it and come back for a breakdown. Also, please like, subscribe, and comment on your favorite moments from this episode. All right, Jared, so what would you rate this episode? We're going to use a 4-star rating system here.
Yeah.
And there is room for half stars.
Oh, interesting. But I think this one's a clear 4. Like, I know it's funny. The first episode we give a rating to, I'm going all in on 4.
Yeah.
But the intrigue is insane. We potentially lose one of the main characters. There's a crossover from the prior, like the drama from the prior episode spills into this episode and will spill into the next episode. And you just don't know where it's going to go.
Well, interesting. We're not too far off on this one. I gave it 3.5. Gave it so many stars for all the reasons you already mentioned.
Yeah.
And then half star off for me because I know Donna's coming back. The way they left this for me, I
felt like it was melodrama.
I felt like there was just a hint of melodrama there.
Yeah.
I felt like the actors delivered, the storyline is generally good, but the fact that I'm all but certain she's coming back and coming back probably pretty quickly, that little bit of melodrama was a half star off for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm giving the half star because I don't know how or why she's going to come back. I know she is, but I don't know how or why. So that gives me the half star.
Yeah, fair. So they kind of nailed this one.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think. I'm always curious to see how everybody else received the episode.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like, including if you look at Reddit, it's kind of wild, the disparity of opinion on characters or plot points.
Yeah, and we're pretty new to the show. There are people who've been mulling this over for ages, and
yeah.
I'm always curious to see what people think.
Agreed.
I want to start with the Emancipation Case. So we have Marco, a rising tennis star who wants to be emancipated to go pro.
Can I just say I love that this show loves tennis as much as we do?
Yeah, exactly. But they find ways to always shit on tennis.
I know.
I know. It's Lewis's game, not Harvey's.
That's a good... Oh, no. Yeah. Harvey's really good at it. He just doesn't care for it, which is even worse.
Exactly.
He's better than us and has apathy toward it.
It's irrelevant to him.
God damn it.
Okay, so the only problem is Marco's father, this junior tennis star, doesn't want him to be emancipated. We see Harvey jogging through the park and come across Jeffrey, an agent and friend of Harvey's.
Never thought I'd see the great Harvey Specter break a sweat.
He's approaching Harvey to ask him about representing Marco in this case.
Yep.
So pretty quickly after Jeffrey approaches Harvey, we find out that Jeffrey wants to help his client, Marco, become emancipated.
Yep.
Raises a few questions. First, how difficult is it to become emancipated?
Well, it's state-by-state decision, and it's like extremely difficult, to be honest. I mean, you hear about it because celebrities occasionally become emancipated, and it's big news. But it's quite difficult. I mean, maybe give them maybe give the audience a little background on what actually would cause it.
Yeah, the court's going to consider a lot of different factors in a situation like this, but high level, they're trying to make sure that the basic needs of a child are being met.
Yeah.
There is no world in which they would step in and emancipate a child because, slight differences in opinion about parenting styles, for example.
Yeah. And it's not that compelling to say, well, he wants to go pro.
Yeah, exactly. And so it'd be, some really quickly, a few things you might look at are basic needs like, food and housing being met,
abuse potentially.
Is there abuse?
Yeah.
Does the kid have access to education?
Yeah.
Things like that. And it's not going to be, they're not going to step in to question a parent's choices whenever it's something that's a difference of opinion, essentially.
Yeah, maybe an easy way to think about it is it's not they're not going to question choices. They will question whether or not a parent is meeting the child's basic needs. In this situation, Marcos is saying he doesn't care about the money. He just cares about going pro for the competitive nature of it. Would that make his case stronger or weaker?
Not really. It's not even going to really factor in a situation like this. The court, again, is looking to whether or not these basic needs of a child are being met.
Yeah.
And they're not really going to weigh in on the purity of Marco's motives. You know, it's like, yeah. So probably essentially not relevant.
No.
Here.
Well, and that's kind of how the episode plays out. As we see, they're looking and grasping for reasons that maybe tie back to basic well-being as their
stronger arguments.
Exactly.
100%. And so then later we see Harvey's representation of MJ enter the conversation. So they bring up the fact that Michael Jordan dropped out in his prime, and the only reason he's able to live with that decision is because it was a choice he himself made.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to draw that comparison here. I mean, Michael Jordan was an adult who dropped out in his prime. He was much later in his career. I think there are a lot of differences, but...
Well, that's a great premise for an ESPN article, not for a court case.
Yeah, well said. Yeah. It's not going to factor into the emancipation.
No.
Mr. Mendoza, I want to be clear. I'm not here to exploit your son. I'm here to protect him.
We're off to a good start. You represent Michael Jordan.
I do. In fact, I want to tell you a story about him.
One thing to keep in mind is, technically, from an ethical perspective, he's not supposed to state the names of his other clients.
Yeah. I think as a general rule, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's technicalities here, or maybe MJ gave him. Maybe MJ's like, "You're so good, I'll let you express that." Also, could they not find a Knicks player?
No, it's MJ. I mean, you want a second-rate player, somebody who's not arguably the best of all time.
That's true.
Associated with Harvey.
He's ascended his parochial fandom and is a fan of the sport. He's a fan of greatness. That's what I think I realized.
He's a fan of greatness.
Yeah, I get that.
Just some really good basketball player is not going to fit the bill.
No, it's true.
Let me tell you a story about George Washington. Maybe Junior here could become president.
I'm really more of an Abe Lincoln fan myself. You know, freed the slaves, great beard.
You finished?
I thought that was such a throwaway comment, but it was a perfect setup for that. You finished?
I mean, dude, that's the first time he's actually expressed frustration in front of a client.
In front of a client, yeah. That's true.
And that one felt like the most real.
He was starting to warm up with the little lippy for so early in the morning. Let's talk about this scene, though. Does the comparison between Michael Jordan and Marco make sense here?
I don't see it. And the implication is that that Marcos is in his prime right now, but they don't explicitly say it. And I think that's reasonable.
And he's almost certainly not
a
tennis player.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like they're arguing that this will slow him down from reaching his prime, but he's not in his prime.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, tennis is a weird one because it's not just your athletic prowess. It's also like the mental game of it all. And I don't think you reach your prime until you're at least like 24, realistically.
I mean, on top of it, MJ wasn't emancipated. Yeah. I don't know. That one felt like a stretch where he's just shoehorning in.
Let's put it this way. I was a little disappointed by Harvey's argument.
Yeah. I mean, but do you think it works from a credibility perspective? So like trying to... I guess win over Marco's dad. Do you think that the fact that he brings up MJ
based on Marcos's dad's response, that's a hard no.
Yeah, it's like, better question. Would you have tried it? Would you have been tempted to just shoehorn in? There
are times whenever name dropping works.
Yeah.
For blue collar, like in serious fathers like this, no way.
No way.
Yeah. Couldn't
agree more. We see Mike get personally involved in this case. Surprise, surprise.
You mean when he talks about Abe Lincoln?
Well, not there so much.
Emancipation requires proof that your father is an unfit parent. We have to think about how this plays in court. And telling a judge that he just wants you to wait until you finish high school before you make millions of dollars is not going to cut it.
Mike does a really good job explaining that somebody needs to be an unfit parent
for
the child to become emancipated. It's not, waiting a couple of years to try and go pro in a sport.
Exactly.
But inspired by his relationship or lack thereof with his own dad, Mike's trying to convince Marco to reconcile with his father. And during that conversation, Marco starts to imply that his dad has been abusive and mentions this dehydration incident that led to hospitalization.
Yeah.
So we end up finding out that Marco's implication about his father was a lie. Do you think Mike was able to catch a glimpse of that lie? Or, his desire to empathize with Marco kind of got in the way of him seeing this lie?
I think he did, based on his line of questioning and the way he pointedly said, your father needs to be an unfit parent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Mike really buys it, but maybe I'm wrong. How about you?
Well, so he's saying that before we then get to Marco's implication about the dehydration. So I think that he's really questioning Marco's intent here at the onset, but then I think whenever he mentions the dehydration incident and the
You think he
potential,
buys it?
I think he buys it hook, line, and sinker. And I think
Mike is naive.
he's a little naive. He's this incredibly bright, this savant
Yeah.
who has this really big block around reading people because he wants to believe them so much.
Yeah. Harvey would describe it as his bleeding heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
and so
agree.
whenever he knows that somebody is antithetical, whenever he knows that somebody is going against him,
Yeah.
he is able to detect this and strategize around it. But I think in situations like this with clients where he really wants to believe them and he wants to be on their side, he just has this huge blind spot.
I think you're right.
After this, initially maybe naive outlook on the situation, Mike realizes that it was Jeffrey that was responsible for the dehydration incident, and Mike doesn't hesitate to confront him.
Turns out he wasn't even there when Marco ran those laps. But you were.
No, that's bullshit.
I saw the look on your face in court. You knew, and you did nothing.
I don't know if he knew and did nothing. I think he probably coached him to say this. But one of the funnier things here is, there are plenty of lawyer jokes. The only people below the rung of lawyer is sports agent.
Yeah, it's show really captures that.
Yes, he is slimy.
You got me. But it doesn't matter because we won.
No, we didn't. Because I'm not filing papers based on a lie.
Harvey's gonna make you regret
Harvey's not
that.
going to do shit.
Do you think Harvey knew this was the real Jeffrey?
I mean, based on that interaction on Central Park, he definitely thought the guy was a little slimy and wanted to keep him at arm's length.
Yeah, he's like, what are you looking for?
Yeah. He always knew there was an angle.
Yeah, well said. And I think that at this point, that's maybe the biggest difference between Harvey and Mike still.
Yeah.
It's like the bleeding heart versus a healthy level of cynicism.
Agreed.
We see them kind of merging to some extent, but there's plenty of space between the two still.
Yeah, you got to give Mike credit for the fact that while he was naive at first, he continued to dig and found the real answer.
And then wasn't afraid of the confrontation.
Good point. I think a lot of people are afraid of confrontation.
Yeah. So we hear Harvey say at one point, I cut billion-dollar deals for breakfast.
Yeah.
And it's this corny, obnoxious way of saying it, but he brings up a good point that he's typically handling these enormous matters with, tremendous stakes, be it money or otherwise. And handling a minor's emancipation case isn't really in line with that. And he tells Mike as much. And so, question being, why is he handling this case?
I think there are a litany of reasons that he could.
Yeah.
A couple that come to my mind are, one is the personal interest of it. If he likes tennis, he wants to watch tennis down the road. He wants to get tickets. There's something, I think, selfish in his mind to being close to someone who may be famous down the road. I think a second one, which is kind of more likely, is a lot of these people who are law is a referral game in a lot of ways. That's how you get new cases. That's how you get new transactions. Not always, but that's a large portion of it. And knowing who the power brokers are in the ecosystem is important. And you may be willing to kind of do a less than interesting case or transaction in order to get the bigger one later, so that they think of you as their lawyer.
That makes sense. Just so you're a go-to.
You're their go-to.
Yeah.
You want to consume all things. You want to be their first call.
Makes a lot of sense. And so, while this wouldn't be squarely in Harvey's wheelhouse or even Pearson Hardman's wheelhouse for that matter, it's like you go out of your way to make things work for clients.
Exactly.
or other power brokers
Yep.
like that. Let's move on to Lewis and Bruno the
Oh, the
Cat.
best, dude.
Like, we see a lot of vulnerability from Lewis and Harvey in this episode.
I totally agree.
And we kind of see the vulnerability play out for Lewis through his cat.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. That guy would not be vulnerable about himself.
Yeah, you need a prop of some sort.
This isn't really helping your street cred, Harold.
It's not mine, it's Lewis's.
Have you mentioned to Lewis that you're allergic?
Well, I tried to, but he said that
Allergies are a sign of weakness.
I'd be, to be honest, I'd be quite weak. I'm allergic to cats.
Me too. It's pretty bad.
Yikes.
Right, and bringing your cat to work is a sign of strength.
Yeah, you want to trade places?
I love how he doesn't skip a beat.
Nope.
Lewis is quick as hell.
Nope. Nope, I got a meeting in the conference room.
That's right, that little tennis sling makes me sick. Harvey's got no appreciation for the game. Man wouldn't know topspin if it hit him in the ball sack.
Oh, why would topspin hit him in the ball sack?
It doesn't make any sense.
But it's good, man. It's good.
But I wouldn't have it any other way.
The rage is clear.
Yeah.
He lands the rage.
It's a bit of a shame that Lewis isn't representing the tennis player.
After watching him play tennis, he may think he's good, but
Fair.
yeah.
Bruno isn't eating, so you give him milk.
I did.
This is half and half.
That's actually absurd.
That is a crazy move.
God. Like, how do you not know the difference between milk and half? Jesus Christ, dude. You deserve to be punched around a little bit.
Hey, you know what? Maybe next time I'll just hand my cat over to Michael Vick.
Too soon still.
Leaves the room. I'm like, what's his name? The associate here deserves it. That's crazy.
100%. There's
You
no
find
doubt.
like a white liquid, and you're like, well, it's milk.
It's in a carton. Dude, there's so much fat in that. Oh my God.
But so, is Lewis showing a softer side of himself here?
Well, he's showing. If you mean by being an asshole.
Yeah, exactly what I'm asking.
Yes, he cares. He's showing that he can care about something other than himself and his success.
And do we think that that's going to transition into him showing more vulnerability? Because I say he's showing vulnerability. What he's doing is he's showing how much he cares about, to your point, something other than himself. He's actually doing it in like not a very vulnerable way.
Not
He's
at
being
all.
a total prick.
Yes.
And so you're like, but I guess question being, does this show of caring slip into his work a little bit?
Yeah, is it foreshadowing future empathy?
Well said. Yeah, is it foreshadowing that?
And my answer is I definitely am leaning that way. Like that's what it's putting me in a position for, oh, maybe Lewis isn't like maybe he has the ability to change and grow.
And that's what I'm hoping for. I've just, since we started watching, I've been craving for a Lewis Harvey team up. And I'm like, every time we see more humanity and empathy from Lewis, and every time we see more empathy from Harvey, like there's a world in which these two come together.
They're so close. Star-crossed
We
lovers.
need it.
Star-crossed lovers.
All right, so Lewis is running late to take his cat to the dentist, and we find out Lewis and Harvey have the same dentist here.
Is that a cat carrier in your hand?
No,
Is there a cat in that thing?
it's called the Feline Transportation Unit.
That's like, it's too much.
I know.
But I love it.
Well, because now it's not. It's expected. They've created the expectation of the absurd.
I also love it whenever shows do this, where it's like they're balancing how serious it is. So at times they're like intentionally taking you out of the drama a little bit. I think.
Yeah. Good point.
Where you're like, oh, these aren't real humans. The stakes are now lower.
Yeah. You don't want your blood pressure through the roof.
Yeah, exactly. The entire time you're watching.
Dentist.
With a cat.
For the cat.
You take him to a cat dentist?
I can't take him to my dentist. Dr. Schneller wouldn't know what to do with him.
Dr. Richard Schneller?
Goodbye, Harvey.
I don't want to hear it.
The look of shock is legit.
Yeah, it's great acting.
Yeah.
All right, so how often do people at big firms end up using the same providers, same service providers, be it accountants, I don't know,
Financial planners.
hairdressers, even dentists?
Ooh.
Do referrals float around like this a lot?
For sure. Referrals float around. On the accounting, financial planning side, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if like a partnership utilized one of three accountants for the partner's like tax services. Like very small grouping because there's so much economy of scale to knowing the tax filing.
Yeah, and they're going to
example.
have virtually this exact same consideration.
For sure. And so you can keep the cost down significantly if you guys utilize the same person. But, people have different personalities, so you may have, instead of just one, there may be two or three. On the hairdresser or dentist side of things, that's not as tightly cropped, but it's definitely utilized for sure.
And here it was a coincidence, so...
Yeah, even better. I mean, I'm guessing once you're in a certain echelon of compensation, you and your colleagues are going to the same overpriced service.
There are only so many people that overcharge by that much.
Yeah.
It was too late. Bruno was suffering. Excuse me.
No.
I once was talking to a colleague, and he was describing the idea of having a child as something that like created this bond with other people in the world that you kind of lose as you get more specialized in your career. So like there is as you continue to get more specialized and grow up in your career, it's like you start relating to people or there are certain people that can only relate to your situation, right? Like you practice law, you practice this kind of law, you have these type of clients, and then all of a sudden it's like only like maybe 100 people in the world really understand in the granular detail of what your life experience is. But then you have kids, and most of the world has kids, and all of a sudden the experiences you're experiencing in your everyday life is the same as the random person you've never met across the aisle in the supermarket. And I kind of feel that's the same way in this situation.
Pets do the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so many people can relate to it, and you don't have to understand Lewis's intricacies to know somebody loves their pet.
Exactly.
Yeah. I also feel like these heartfelt moments are just that much more sincere in an environment where it's really cutthroat.
Yes.
And they're really competitive, and so whenever they go out of their way to do something thoughtful and sweet, it just hits that much harder.
Yeah, it resonates.
Yeah. Do you think that's the beginning of a new friendship between Lewis and Rachel?
I think it is, until Lewis acts like an ass.
Ouch. Is that going to take 10 minutes? Is that
maybe tomorrow?
Yeah. Do we get through a few episodes? All right. So regardless, we see Lewis's vulnerability playing out in this episode through his cat.
Yep.
We see Harvey's vulnerability playing out through his lack of control around the missing document.
Yep.
And Donna. So let's get to Donna and the missing document situation here. At the beginning of the episode, I said it, took a half star off because it's like she's coming back. And honestly, I think it's maybe not even fair to the episode. The reason I know she's coming back is because she's so integral.
Yeah.
They did a pretty good job making this seem sincere.
Yeah. If you had watched this as it came out, you would think, wow, is this the Red Wedding episode?
Towards the beginning of the episode, we see Donna trying to shred the document, and Mike catches her.
And that paper doesn't put itself in the machine, right?
What the hell is wrong with you?
Me? You're the one that looks like you're burying a dead body.
Was Donna thinking about the consequence of shredding evidence?
Doesn't seem like it. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like she is frantic, and she is trying to make the problem go away.
Yeah.
I don't think she's really thinking about the long-term consequences here. And she's also, never mind the fact that it's clearly illegal. I don't think she's even thinking about, strategically, is this better or worse?
I agree. I think it's a reminder that in these moments of high stress, you're kind of in your amygdala and you're not taking a step back to see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, which, maybe this is a little bit detached from the scene here, but I think worth mentioning, that is something that is, generally speaking, a shared trait of great litigators, is you're able to, when you need to, lower the cortisol and assess a situation. I'm sure it's the same for deal work. There's like a lot of moving pieces, and
I think it's just it's a trait of great leaders generally.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, if it's something that's consequential, which most legal matters are, you kind of need a good leader in that role. All right, so in the same vein, we later see Donna explode at Rachel about Norma's birthday card.
Well, we've seen her with Rachel take her out, try to calm her down on her past experience, like negative experiences at the firm.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's the one who is this great leader in that way.
The sage, the what's that called? Shaman. She's the shaman.
Yeah, she's exactly. And so I don't know, is it because this is so consequential, or is it because she's just not used to navigating mistakes?
I think it cuts against her identity. And when
Yeah.
that happens, you kind of like lose all perspective.
I think that's right. I feel like maybe even beyond that, though, the biggest difference here is Donna doesn't think Harvey can get her out of it.
To be honest, if I were in her shoes and with the asymmetrical information here, I kind of get where she's coming from. Like I would have the same feeling.
Yeah, I would assume that we're toast at this point.
I'm not saying I would have the same action as I would take the same action that she does, but I would feel that feeling.
I would go as far as to say I definitely would not take the same action, but the initial response of panic in a situation like this, I think is inevitable. And it's worth pointing out the only thing that matters is what you do with that.
Agreed.
After the reaction. So Mike pieces this all together, the Rachel snapping, the shredding, Donna's strange behavior generally.
Yeah.
And we see it play out in this clip.
It's not Dalton Enterprises you're holding. That's the memo that Harvey's been accused of burying.
Yeah, and I mean, this is an episode full of vulnerability. We were talking about Lewis and Harvey, but then obviously we see it here with Donna.
Yeah.
And we see Mike assuming a different role where he's maturing as a lawyer, and he's pointing out, he is the rational third party who's not in the thick of the emotional response, in this situation.
I mean, one of the things we notice here is he's basically bringing this back to his loyalty to Harvey. And he's saying, how could you go contra to that, Donna, after all he's done for both of us?
I think that that's right. I also think that we see Mike maturing as a lawyer here, where he is the, detached voice of reason, and not the one who's swaying with the changing circumstances on the ground.
Yeah.
He mentions that the longer they wait, the bigger the bite's going to be. And
he's right.
He's absolutely right. And then later on in the episode, or at some point in the episode, he ultimately comes to the same conclusion that Harvey's come to, where it's like, oh, the document could actually help.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that that hasn't been conveyed to Donna, or at least not in time.
Agreed.
Earlier, you brought up a great point, which is like, he does ultimately realize it, but it's like, he should have realized it sooner and should have said something to her.
Probably.
As this document situation plays out, we see Harvey confront Donna in the bathroom.
Yep.
What the hell were you thinking?
I didn't know how to tell you.
Harvey, I found the memo. Is that so goddamn hard?
You don't understand. It had my name on it. I stamped it in. That implicates you.
Like, we see things really heating up here.
Yeah.
I had never made a mistake like that, and I thought that I needed
Look, keeping it from me isn't a mistake. It's a decision.
I wanted to protect you.
Lying to me doesn't protect me.
This is the most heated we've ever seen a conversation between these two, and it starts to become clear how high the stakes are.
Totally.
Do you think Harvey ever imagined losing Donna?
So, I mean, he was clearly pissed off. He was explaining how she messed up time and time again, and that it was a decision, not a mistake. Like, it was quite clear how he felt about it. But she said, maybe you shouldn't be my boss. And his face, the blood from his face completely vanished. He was shocked. Like, I don't think he was prepared for that.
Yeah, and it seems like Harvey always has an answer for everything, or at least he thinks he does, to the point that, like, it seems like he doesn't really plan for these worst case scenarios. I imagine he's probably never really thought of it.
That's surprising.
Yeah, it's like,
but I think you're right. He was caught off guard there.
it's not that he's not thinking about solutions. He's always thinking about solutions and creative solutions, but he's never really thinking about like worst case scenario, because it seems like he so rarely has to go
Is he
there.
just like a massive optimist?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's really who he is.
Yeah.
We now have this shocking moment with one of our favorite characters.
I'm not here to see Harvey. He wanted to be the one to have this conversation with you. But it's my firm, and I wanted you to hear it from me.
Am I being fired?
Can Donna ever come back from this? You already know my answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both sit on the side of the fence that says she's going to be back. But I mean, there has to be some restitution or rehabilitation that, again, I just don't know how. That's what I'm most... They've caught me in a cliffhanger of how does she come back, not does she come back.
Well said. And so I think that doesn't really distract from the show in that sense, because I don't have a clue what the missing piece is here.
No.
But she's going to come back. I feel like 99% sure she's coming back.
Yeah.
And I have no clue how at the moment.
I also think the fact is how is the firm going to survive this interaction? I mean, the drama of what happens to Donna ultimately, and how does she return, and what happens to Pierce and Hardman are like wide open at the end of this episode.
100%, which gets us to our final plot line of the episode, which is Jessica and Hardman's power play.
Yeah. And
so we see all this playing out in the shadow of the Jessica and Hardman power play here.
Yeah.
To the point that you're like, Hardman is looking, he looks like the bigger man in a lot of situations.
Totally.
But it does raise suspicion. It's like, how is he going to leverage this? Because you know he's going to try and leverage it.
He's not virtuous.
He's not virtuous. We just don't know what his angle is yet.
Agreed.
No, there's an angle.
Well, and Harvey and Jessica are feeling the unsteadiness or the instability of that.
Yeah.
You're putting a cattle prod up its ass.
Is that the same crack advice you gave Brockton Cosmetics, Drake Consulting, and
She lost 2 cases. This is insane.
Consulting and Nappy LLC? Because none of those companies exist anymore.
Well, congratulations, Harvey. You found the 3 cases that I've lost in 14 years. And do you know what else those cases have in common? Nothing.
So Hardman brings Allison Holt in to investigate more about the missing document. This is a big situation. They should bring in outside counsel. They should investigate. They should figure out what's going on, get to the bottom of it. But is this a Hardman power play to try and get his person inserted?
I mean, it's believable that it's not. What's your take on that?
I don't know. It's too early to tell. I'm suspicious of everything Hardman does.
Yeah.
But he's actually been, on its face, he has been the bigger man.
Agreed.
So many times as this saga is unfolding, and I'm just waiting for the snapback.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, maybe Jessica and Harvey are definitely on pins and needles around him. So maybe the fact that they're constantly skeptical is what's keeping them alive here.
Yeah, and I think that's our biggest clue into the fact that Hardman's intentions are not virtuous. Is like these two people, love them or hate them. I think basically everybody watching, us included, loves them.
You're transposing their emotion onto yourself.
Yeah, and in as much as like Harvey has been rash and his judgment has been questionable throughout this saga,
totally,
I can't help but think he's onto something.
I agree.
And I mean, Hardman, he's this incredibly conniving power player. What's going on?
Agreed.
Something's going on.
Because I learned from my mistakes.
Well, I'd prefer to be represented by someone who doesn't make any mistakes in the first place.
Because you've been accused of bearing evidence not once, but twice.
So the proxy war continues, and here's my final thought on my little conspiracy theory here.
Can't wait.
Hardman sees vulnerability.
Yep.
Harvey has been accused of burying a document. Where does Hardman go with that? I don't know. But the fact that there's this very convenient vulnerability, it's like, is that Hardman? Is that Tanner? Somebody is seeing a vulnerability and trying to attack it.
Agreed.
All right, so then we see Jessica hire Allison.
I like you.
Well, this may be something that you don't like. You won't be the one dictating terms here. I will.
So Allison nags her way into the job.
Yes, basically.
I get the idea that it's like, look, I'm going to be a straight shooter and I'm going to
be honest.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell you things like these inconvenient truths. Feels like there must be a different way to do it.
Well, it just feels too gendered.
It feels too gendered.
And that's fraught with a lot of baggage that they don't unpack.
So Jessica is presented with a deal to remove Harvey as a partner by Hardman.
Yeah. I guess the question for me is, was this just, Hardman's plan to move Harvey out of the way to destabilize Jessica's leadership?
It's starting to look that way, but it's so hard to tell. The writers have done a fantastic job making Harvey seem incredibly rash, and Hardman seem pretty level-headed on this episode, and the voice of reason. So I don't know.
When we've had many episodes of Harvey being rash, it just somehow pulls a rabbit out of the hat.
And it's starting to really compound, and he doesn't have a solution, at least so far.
And at some point, you start believing that Hardman's altruism is maybe real.
Yeah, exactly. And so I leave this episode not knowing exactly where to stand, but let's play the next clip where Jessica asks Hardman to her office and puts him in his place.
Yeah.
I summoned you because I wanted you to understand who you were threatening earlier.
I wasn't threatening you. I was pointing out facts.
we're left with this question. Are Jessica and Harvey paranoid, or is Hardman working an angle?
Another reason why this is a 4.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. Like, and they've been stringing that out over 4 episodes and doing a good job of keeping the intrigue. There's a constant level of up and down, and you just don't know.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I have to assume we're so early in this series that I have to assume Harvey and Jessica are, the virtuous ones here.
Yeah.
But Harvey's flying off the handles right and left. You're left not totally sure.
Agreed. I mean, would you trust him to be your steady hand?
Not right now, no.
Agreed.
And as for your point about a law being broken, you're right. I'm not going to sit by and do nothing.
And there's a culmination of that dynamic earlier in the episode where Harvey is being reckless and he can't see it.
Yeah.
This is why you hire outside counsel. You can't see how reckless that was even now after it's blown up in your face.
Fine. If you insist on pre-deposing their depositions, let's get it over with.
So ultimately, it's hard not to agree with Hardman here. I've already said it.
His conclusion's right.
His conclusion is right. So it's like, what are we missing?
Yeah.
What are we missing is the question I'm left with at the end of this episode.
I totally agree with you.
And to your point, amazing job building that intrigue.
Yeah. And for the most part, in the first season, I would argue that a lot of the episodes are fully self-contained. You have the character development through the actions of the episode, but you could watch the episode if you knew who the characters were. Any of them drop in and you'd be fine.
And I found that pretty comforting,
Agreed.
but it lacked the intrigue that we're getting in this season.
The development's bigger.
Yeah, and we're left with these pretty huge cliffhangers in this episode, and hopefully get some resolution next week.
Yeah, agreed.
Looking forward to seeing everyone then, and as always, thanks for watching.
Awesome. See you next week.